All right, so all of this stuff, so Trump, you're laying out a decent case of putting all this stuff together, but let's talk quickly about the pushback from the establishment, because I think that's an underreported piece about this, that the establishment has tried very hard to push back on this, and they're rolling out Mitt Romney, who lost. The guy who lost last time is supposed to be the savior, right?
Dumb.
You roll out, Lindsey Graham goes from failed candidate, he endorses another failed candidate, another, like they just roll out the same guys. And then if you watch the debates, and I've watched 90% of them, Trump systematically, whether you agree with him or not, systematically destroys these people. I mean, he embarrassed Jeb Bush.
Actually, it's worse than that. He unsystematically destroys these people. I mean, he seems to have no particularly consistent approach to destroying them. He just rocks up, cracks a few jokes, and tells it how it is. It's actually unsystematic, which is even more of an indictment on the establishment, how dumb they are, how stupid they are. They think we're idiots. They think we're idiots.
So do you think if the establishment had found someone that basically knew who he was, had decent conservative principles. So it's not, I guess the closest to that could have possibly been Jeb, but the Bush name was so damaging.
No,
he was also a terrible candidate.
No, he's a classic cuck.
Yeah,
as we say on the internet.
So cuck, why don't you define cuck? Because I see this popping up all the time.
Well, so I like this word, and all the rest of the conservative media don't, because they know it describes them. And it is, well, so I know that you probably don't watch any pornography anymore, because since you've been with your partner for so long,
I don't want to get into my personal life.
Barely have sex anymore.
Here.
More like a lesbian.
Go ahead.
Just sexless.
Sexless. I'm asking you about cuck.
Well, I'm about to talk about porn. That's why I'm asking.
Okay.
So if you were a porn viewer,
yes.
I'm not particularly a porn viewer.
Yeah.
If you were a porn viewer, he didn't like that, did he? If you were we're sure to double down on that one.
Yeah.
If you were a porn viewer, you may be familiar with a genre of porn in which sort of white husband watches his wife get rammed by a large black man. Now, it's not always a large black man, it's sometimes others, whatever, and this is cucking, this is cuckoldry, from Shakespeare, and I think Chaucer too, where it wasn't anything to do with race. I don't think it's specifically to do with race, it's just sort of become a bit of a porn genre as well. But anyway, the idea is it's people who have sold out and are enjoying watching their wife, their country, their people that they're supposed to look after, whether it's readers in the case of journalists or it's constituents in the case of politicians, getting fucked by some scary external force, whether it's radical Islam or mass immigration or whatever. Now, it's metaphoric, it's a metaphor, and it's a perfectly good and perfectly fun, vibrant sort of metaphor. I quite like it, and I use it myself. I think it's fun, and it's very it's vivid. Of course, conservatives now, the conservative establishment, which has basically gone along with all of the tenets of the left, and now looks to the left for approval. Is it okay? Can I say this? Is this racist? Is this sexist? The right-wing establishment is so terrified of being seen as racist that they sort of distance themselves from this word in case there are any sort of racial connotations whatsoever. Oh no, we can't go. Anyway, Jeb is a perfect example of this. He's somebody who is weak, there's no sense with Jeb Bush. There was never any sense, and I feel a bit sorry he's gone now because he seemed a kind of nice guy, but there's no sense he would ever stick up for his country. And the one thing you can't say about Trump is that he wouldn't stick up for America. Now, you may disagree with some of his prescriptions, but he clearly loves the country. He clearly wants America to be great again. Now, that's a very provocative slogan, make America great again. The again has the again.
Right, it implies that something was lost.
Right, there's a big and shocking claim in there, one that politicians don't normally make, that the country is not great. In fact, it's the sort of thing you normally hear from liberals, if we're honest. Obama clearly doesn't like this country very much. But you don't normally hear it from conservatives. Now, there's something very exciting going on with that, right? With this candidate, it's something very exciting on that terrifies the establishment. But what I've realised, which I think is really interesting, is that Trump has illustrated that the concerns of the elites, the concerns of the establishment, the concerns of journalists and politicians and the people who run our lives are so alien from what ordinary people care about that they can't even argue against him and it resonate with the public. I mean, let's take, for example, something that you and I both care about, the First Amendment, free speech, freedom of the press. Trump has repeatedly suggested that he would like to, in some way, curtail the full freedoms of the press. He would like... Yeah,
just this week with the Washington Post editorial.
He would like to make it more... I think what he's saying is he wants to strengthen defamation law, right?
Bad news, particularly for you, even more than me, right?
Well, is it? Because I don't lie about people. I might say funny names sometimes. I might ridicule people, but I don't lie about them like the liberal press does every day. And the conservative press is just as bad, frankly. They're all terrible. I don't libel people. I don't make up facts about people. Why would I worry about that? I mean, let's look at it from an electoral point of view, right? The public...
My head just went through like the list of all my liberal friends that lie constantly publicly, and
all of them,
that would suffer from this. So.
Yeah, right, exactly. But I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I've
my
never.
Rolodex just.
I mean, I say the most appalling things about people, but they're true. And I've never been sued. Milo Yiannopoulos, have never been sued. I mean, you would imagine I'd be in court every week. You know, no, I don't get sued.
Also, because there's a difference between satire. Joking about.
No, but I get my facts right.
Yeah.
You know, there are people who are in court every week, and it's Gawker, you know, because they are so completely unethical. I mean,
so that's why the right felt that the Gawker thing with Hogan. I know we're jumping all over the place. That's why the right
we enjoyed that.
The right really loved it, but I saw it as a huge victory too, because we have places like Gawker that are literally trying to destroy lives. It's enough. It's enough,
and you know they out private citizens.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I mean, look. That'll probably get overturned on appeal, and it's probably better that we don't have an anti-free speech precedent of quite that nature, because who knows what kinds of sex tapes might be in the public interest in future. Two things is, you know, Pinellas County, Florida juries don't set legal precedent, and it's going to get overturned on appeal.
Right, so it'll be appealed.
And anyway,
we'll see. Yeah.
On the Trump thing, when he says that the press are the bad guys, most people agree with him. And this is what the press doesn't understand, because they genuinely believe that they are like some sort of like warriors for truth and justice. They're not. They're the bad guys. The media in this country, there's been a systemic industry-wide failure to tell the truth in this country. Well, that's the normal situation under which the government steps in. That's what we do when it's oil. That's what we do when it's some other kind of industry. When there is a system-wide failure in an industry, banking, for instance, the government steps in. And, you know, there's no reason why the First Amendment should insulate you from the consequences of your actions if you go out and deliberately, mendaciously, knowingly lie about people. And the key word is knowingly. If you knowingly... Now, the libel standard in this country...
Slippery slope, though, right?
Well, I would say
This is a guy who gets offended by Megyn Kelly every other day. God only knows what he would want to do to her.
I think she's a hell of a lot more triggered by him than he is by her.
Well, that may be, but he's on his way to becoming the most powerful man on earth, and she's just a reporter. So I get what you're saying, that if she's telling the truth, then fine. But what I would say is
she's telling the truth,
it's a
she's got nothing to worry
slippery thing
about.
when you have the most offended, you know, this guy who loves giving offense, but at the same time is incredibly thin-skinned.
I don't think he's
putting in libel laws.
He's not thin-skinned.
I know the president can't do that.
He's not thin-skinned at all. He is playing a very smart game where he is illustrating the absurdities of, you know, of offense taking and offense culture. The thing is, you've got to understand about Trump. He didn't become a billionaire by accident. He's one of the smartest people in the country. You know, he's so clever. Everything he does is calculated. Everything he does is designed to create a particular effect, designed to reach a certain goal.
So he even uses bankruptcy to his advantage, I guess would prove.
Well, who wouldn't? I mean, you know, liberals love to do this bullshit. You know, of course he did. He was a businessman. Of course he donated to Hillary. So would I, if I was running a business and there was a strategic advantage. Of course I'd go to her wedding. I'd have her at my wedding, or whatever.
That probably was his best moment in the first debate when he admitted.
Who cares? Of course you would. It's so dumb to suggest otherwise. The reason it offends people so much, or the reason it surprised people so much, is most politicians have never done anything other than politics. So if they cozy up to a liberal, it looks like treachery, or it looks like inconsistency, it looks like ideological kind of tomfoolery. Well, Trump has never been in that position. He was a businessman. Of course he did these things. But I want to just finish on the press thing. When Trump says the press are the bad guys, and he does it in his speeches all the time, he gets some of the biggest cheers of any of his stuff, right? When he says, you know, the press will never cover you, the press will never turn around and show these huge crowds. All they'll do is if there's a protest, they'll go down there. There's a protest, they go, these guys are losers, they're losers. They get some of the those lines get some of the biggest applauses. The country hates the press. And when the press is like pearl clutching about, you know, oh, First Amendment, like our freedom. Well, you misused those freedoms. You abused those freedoms. You started lying about men, lying about race, lying about immigration, lying about Islam, lying about everything that matters. The press has lied systematically to everyone about everything, every day, all the time, for decades. It has abused its privileges. And, you know, frankly, I'm with Trump and with most Americans. The press is part of the problem. And for them to, you know, stop pearl clutching about the First Amendment, well, you know what? Tough. You abused this for decades.
Okay, so when you take the power that the press has, a lot of power, You take the power that the establishment has on both sides, a lot of power, Democrats, Republicans, right? You add all that up, and now we still don't have an election until November, right? We're in the end of March here. Can this thing go forward without getting much more violent? That's sort of where I see this all going. And by the way, I'll be very clear and say that I don't know which way the violence is going to come from. I'm not going to say this violence is going to just be...
I think we all know which way the violence is going to come from. So, I mean, I don't think you should be such a weasel. I think you should say what you think. And I think you probably agree with me that the violence is going to come from the left. Just say it. Obviously, the violence is going to come from the left.
If Bernie
it's going to come
down,
from Black Lives Matter. It's going to come from people protesting Trump. It's not going to come from Trump protesters.
Well, look, in the beginning of the show...
Just because his chief of staff can be a bit grabby, well, of course he is. Trump is at so much risk of being shot, unlike anybody else. If there's somebody that's going to get assassinated in this country, it's Trump. Is it any wonder that people close to him are a little bit cautious? I don't want to get too much into that because it involves, other people I used to work with. But if there's going to be violence on the streets, it is not going to come from Trump.
It'll be the Bernie people. I get that, and that's not what. And that's ironic. I tweeted the other day, I like Bernie more than I like his supporters, which is really how I feel. Because yes, I do agree. If he goes out, there will have been. Yeah, I know, you're right. But I just, as a human, I think he's a decent human being, whether I agree with his policies or not.
Why? Somebody who makes excuses
poses
up to some of the worst regimes in the world. Somebody who wants to institute socialism, which will make poor people poorer. Somebody who wants to, somebody who believes in the lies that feminist activists tell about men.
We don't have to make this about him now.
No. I mean, don't just throw this stuff out. Do you really mean that? Do you mean that? You think he's a nice person? Why do you think he's a nice person? Everything he believes will make society more hateful and more unequal.
I think that...
Why do you say he's a nice
person?
person?
In what he thinks the solutions are.
So you don't believe in any of his policies, but you think he's a nice person?
I think sometimes you can be a decent person and be
wrong about everything.
In policies.
Well, you're a decent person and you're wrong about lots of things.
Wait, hold on. So
why do you think he's a nice person?
I do agree that the violence will
Why do we automatically assume that just because
somebody's
somebody's old and left-wing that they're nice? We don't do that with right-wingers. Why do we automatically assume just because he's old and doddery and he's got white hair and he sounds like a crazy old lunatic, he must be a nice guy?
I think
really? Is he a nice guy? No, he wants socialism in America.
No,
that's poisonous, ugly, oppressive political philosophy that has made people suffer everywhere it has ever been tried. Everywhere socialism has been implemented, it has made people suffer. Why do people think Bernie Sanders is nice? I don't get it.
I think he
Why? Why do they think? What has he ever done to indicate that he's a decent, nice person? I think the idea... I've never seen anything.
The underpinnings of the ideas that he talks about, of trying to make things more equal and trying to change the system, which is the exact same stuff.
The feeling stuff, in other words. The feeling stuff.
That's
you like the feeling stuff.
Wait, but you're telling me that the Trump revolution is a cultural revolution that has a little something to do with the feeling, right? But I don't want to get totally sidetracked on that.
It's not.
It's not a feeling?
It's not about feelings.
Well, it has something to do with feelings. You're telling me all these people, and I'm agreeing with you on that.
No, cultural libertarianism is not about feelings. Cultural libertarianism is a response to feelings over facts. In fact, the defining characteristic of cultural libertarianism is rigorous adherence to evidence-based policymaking and evidence-based beliefs, and a rigorous insistence on classical liberalism. It's got very little to do with feelings. It's got a lot to do with fun, because it's often dressed up in a mischievous package. But cultural libertarianism is a reaction against the feelings-based arguments of the left. The feelings-based arguments of the left, as perfectly identified by Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the apotheosis of everything you hate, but you still feel the need to call him a nice guy because he's old.
All right, so without getting into a Bernie offshoot here, we're probably a little late for that. I will grant you that if Bernie goes down and the narrative just continues, yes, it will be his people, I think, that will be violent, right? Now, the media then will try to blame it on the Trump people. And that doesn't mean that there are no Trump people that are violent, because there are.
Even conservatives are blaming it on Trump. I mean, was it Cruz goes on TV the next, after whatever, saying Trump is responsible for the violence? Are they insane?
Okay,
do they not realize why people are voting for this guy? They're voting for this guy because you lie like that. It's astonishing.
Okay,
anyway,
so at the top of the show, what I mentioned was that just this week, Trump was giving a speech in Arizona, and these protesters blocked the road. These are not people, they think they're doing something good, or they're doing something to stop Trump, but all they're doing
some of
is...
them. The rest are just taking a paycheck from...
whatever it is, but they think that they're stopping Trump somehow, or stopping him from being heard, or going to stop his movement, but I think all they're doing is strengthening him, because they need to have the battle of ideas, because then people turn on the TV, look what these people are doing.
The more these guys protest Daddy, the more they show up and they're violent. It's just like my talks at colleges, you know, these feminists smear blood on themselves.
I saw the video.
And block all the stuff. Everybody saw the video. You know, everybody saw it and everybody thought the same thing. God, Milo must have a point. That's what they thought. and everybody thinks the same thing when when these protesters show up for Trump, and they are the hateful, angry, violent, divisive people, and everybody there for Trump is like laughing. They're all in their hats, making America great again.
But it's not everybody. You'll grant me that, right? It's not everybody. I saw a guy who was screaming at some people go back to Auschwitz. You see some people go back to Africa. I mean, but yes, every political
so
movement.
The media has cherry-picked a few from this side versus a few from that side. This is not.
I'm just saying it's not everybody. I'm not giving the media any great leash here.
No, fine. Well, I mean, okay, I'm sure there are some supporters of Trump who are distasteful people, like there are supporters of Hillary.
Sure.
I think pretty much anyone who supports Hillary at this point is distasteful. I think pretty much anyone who supports Sanders just needs to read a book. Needs to be educated, needs to reach puberty. I don't know. But the thing is about Trump supporters, in my experience, vast majority of them, whether they fall into the various buckets of Trump supporter, whether it's the huge support he has in the black community for all sorts of obvious reasons, because he's a very aspirational, American dream kind of candidate. My colleague at Breitbart, Sunny Johnson, she says, I love him because when I see Trump and he's got his name on the building and he's got a name on a plane, I want that.
Right.
I
There's
want
like
that.
a bling element to it.
Yeah, it's not just that. Some people are offended by that kind of generalization, but.
Oh, fine there. I said something that I thought you'd be, oh my God, he said bling, and now no. Oh, that was a bit much.
No, I mean, maybe that's why they like me. What I mean is, that he's a very classic aspirational candidate for black Americans. Also loved by the gay community, huge gay icon. There's a piece coming out in Mike, I think, and another in Vice soon. I've given interviews for both of these places on why so many gay people love Trump. I think it's obvious. But the two big groups, which are kind of like well-educated, sort of what I call Generation Trump, the internet trolley, some alt-righty, cultural libertarian sort of Trump supporters, who by and large are the best people in the world. They're so funny and interesting and smart and brilliant, and I love them. And the other group, which are also some of the best people in the world, the white working class people,
the white
who are rightly worried about the direction the country is taking.
The company. See, soon it'll be a company.
There we go.
That was the Freudian slip I was looking for the entire time.
Oh, you got me. You got me. It took an hour, but you got me.
Yeah. See, fascism comes with a smile and bleach blonde hair.
Yeah, I'm going to start calling it the firm. We got to fix the firm.
Basically, you're saying that these two groups...
The Queen calls royal family the firm, I think, in England.
Does she?
Yeah.
So these two groups coming together, it will just have... Look, I feel this thing happening.
They're great, joyful, wonderful people, and I love them, and they're both of these groups are my natural constituency. Both of these groups are my readers and my viewers. Both of these groups, I think, hold with them united under Daddy, the promise of a better America. I mean, so I say that with no hint of exaggeration. I think these groups. You think about the Gamergate, thing when video game players, the least likely kind of group in the world to rise up and beat the feminists, and they did beat the feminists, and they were like, really? These and everyone was thinking these parents' basement guys and video gamers, really? And they won. They did what none of the rest of us had done.
Well, they woke this thing up. I did not know that this was happening.
Gamergate was a direct sort of tributary. Is that what you call it when the river comes? Yeah, into Generation Trump. And they woke people up to the fact that if you turn around as a progressive left and you say, I'm not sexist, go fuck yourself, nothing bad happens. And in fact, other people around you start to notice, and they start to do it too. And these two groups together, white working class, ordinary people who are seeing wages depressed and worried about where their country is going, and that very high, and a sort of highly educated college student and into their up to about 35 kind of like Gen X, millennial, borderline people our age, who are sick of having been told what to do for 10 years by the regressive left. This union of people, the what I call Generation Trump, is the most exciting cultural force there has been in this country for decades. And it's a group of people that I'm very proud to be part of and to have a role in, because I think they're great, and I think many of these people, whether it's the gamers in that top end, or the people who just drive trucks for a living, whatever. These are some of the people who have been lied to and lied about the most in American society for decades, and they're sick of it, and they're right to be sick of it. And if they can drive into the White House a candidate like Trump, who is going to build a wall, he's going to fix the trade, he's going to do these things, and then if he doesn't do too much else, that's not such a disaster. A candidate like Trump, who is going to give the present establishment, journalists and politicians alike, the most colossal bloody nose, and they deserve it. They have it coming. They really deserve this.
Yeah.
Then I am fully behind it.
Yeah, and ironically, I think at that point, you could make a strong case that if Bernie does not get the Democratic nomination, that he should actually, a good portion of his people should actually go to Trump. Because whether you agree with Bernie or not, which you obviously don't.
Hillary's obviously going to get the nomination, but the good thing about Trump, one of the things about Sanders and Trump supporters is they're relatively politically promiscuous. That they want is to hurt the bad guys, and the bad guys now are the New York Times, the political class, the banks, whatever. All these people that controlling the rest of us and not in our interests. I think many of them will come over. And I think you'll be surprised just how many come over, because their concerns aren't that different. And when you look at, if you look at like the Sanders rallies and look at the Trump rallies, there's a sort of fun, young, exciting kind of atmosphere in both the crowds. They have a very similar feel to them. The atmosphere at those events is in many ways very similar. And I think people are more interested in the sort of cultural ties across political lines these days than they are with, Republican and Democrat labels.
Right. So those cultural ties, that's really what brought us together. So I guess to wrap all this thing up is that the left, that portion of the left that you would argue is probably 90% of the left, if not 100%, plus me and one other guy. But that
you'll leave.
Yeah. So all right. So you got
those. You'll be a libertarian before long.
So between well, I at this point I would basically say I'm a classic liberal to libertarian, somewhere in there. Which actually, believe it or not, people don't like to hear it, but it's actually on the conservative side.
Well,
if you look at,
choice. I mean, look, if the liberals watching this, you did this to him. I mean, you forced him in. You forced
leftists.
Perfectly nice, domesticated liberal gay man into talking about free speech on the internet, Crazy
what happened here.
Crazy.
But if they did something good between the regressive left and the authoritarians, between the power structure, the media, the politicians, all that, they did wake this thing up. And that's why me and you can sit here and do this and still have a drink after and agree and disagree and whatever, and you did a good sell job. You didn't bring me all the way, but you lay out an interesting case, and that's what I'm interested in hearing.
Yeah.
And so they did do something because all of the people that are in this mix now that we talk about all the time, from Rogan and Christina Hoff Sommers and, Sam Harris and Majid and all of these people all over the map have woken up. So that, to me, is the takeaway that I can feel good about with this, regardless of who becomes president, regardless of the political end of this, is that we're here and we're doing this. And that's what the authoritarians on either side fear the most.
Correct. And I think it's inexorable. I think it is irresistible. If you look at the 1990s, the emergence of political correctness in the 1990s, which was beaten back very successfully by a coalition like us, well, we're the ones doing it now. And although in the 90s, these people, as Christina likes to say, got the assistant professorships and stayed in tenure in the universities and all the rest of it, had to go away from the media, but never really went away. They just sort of, consolidated their power and returned as social justice warriors. This time, there's so much more on the line for them, because if they break this time, they are breaking. They are losing with the full support of politicians, the media, and academia. And if people rise up now and say this social justice thing, this language policing, this political correctness, safe spaces, trigger warnings, microaggressions, this stuff is horse shit. And if enough people smash its stranglehold on the public square, it will never recover. It will never come back in like this again, because it will lose at the height of its powers. It will lose in its strongest possible form. It will lose, as we say in the internet, in its final form. Social justice cannot get any stronger than it is now. It is at the peak of its powers, and it's losing. And it's losing because people want freedom. They want to be able to do, say, think, be, play, and read anything. And they have the faith in themselves and in other people that they are able to make the best judgments for themselves on what they believe in. They don't need to be told how to speak. They don't need to be told which books to read. They don't need to be told which video games are dangerous. They don't need to be told any of these things. They don't need to be instructed and lectured to by politicians. They don't need to be badgered and hectored by feminists. And they don't need to be lied to by journalists. And people are sick of it. And they are sick of the entire mendacious edifice. And this is what is happening so wonderfully right now with people like us and all the other conversations that are happening in cultural libertarian movement and in what I call Generation Trump and Daddy and all this kind of stuff. The fun, mischievous, trolly element on the internet. What is behind all of this, the heart of all of this, is that rejection, that fundamental rejection of the idea that somebody else knows better than I do how I should live my life.
Man, you know how to give a closing argument.
That was really good, right?
That was no cue cards over there at all.
In the hands of professionals here.
For the record, I did not look at these once. I had a lot of questions for you, but I think we did a fine job here. So, of course, I want to thank Milo Yiannopoulos for joining me.
Thank you.
You guys can check out all his stuff at Breitbart.com. Follow him on Twitter. It's at Nero. There are roughly how many copies of you do you think?
Well, I think I'm the most imitated person on the internet who is
they
like
created
a proper rock star.
They created a gremlin in water monster with you. How many really?
Yeah, don't feed him after midnight. I don't know, but if you look, Nero, like the Emperor, who was awesome, except for the Christian burning. Everything else was great.
Perfect.
Nobody's perfect. Well, it was good. You know, he was. I mean, he was an egotist. Fine, I'll take that. You know, he was self-involved. Just fine. He spent too much money on himself. You know, he raised half of Rome and built himself a gigantic palace called the Domus Aurea. Yeah. And when he finally moved into the palace, I think it was from Suetonius. I think he said, "Finally, I can start to live as a human being." You know, he was hated by the elites. The Senate hated him, but loved by the people. So he was probably the best emperor.
So you want to turn this country into a company, and you want your palace. I got it. Anyway, it's at Nero on the Twitter.
There's nobody who wouldn't want to live in Neuropolis.
There's no blue check, but just take my word for it. All right, guys, thanks. We'll do it again next week.